Hello everyone, let's start with a new topic. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, a cornerstone of modern political philosophy. Hegel views state not just as a political institution but as the highest expression of ethical life and human freedom. And then his ideas connect individual freedom, civil society, and the rational state, all three in a dynamic historical process known as dialectics, which forms the cornerstone of his political philosophy. And in this lecture, we are going to explore how Hegel's philosophy shaped concept of law, rights, the role of state in realizing human potential. So, his political philosophy is complex, abstract, and deeply rooted in history, ethics, and reason. And unlike other earlier philosophers who focus on virtues, who focus on values, on individual rights, he saw history itself as a rational process. It means history itself is pushing it, leveraging peoples towards the instance, the platform of greater freedom. Then his main critical work for the philosophy of right, it tries to explain how individual freedom and the authority of state are interlinked. He talked about the harmony between the existence of a state and the provision of individual freedom. In other words, you can take his philosophy as a compromise between how the existence of state, how the authority of a state can ensure individual freedom and both can exist harmoniously. और ये चीज जो है आपको बार बार इसकी पूरी फिलोसफी में द हार्मनी द कॉम्प्रोमाइज विल बी सीन एवरीवेयर. He tried to achieve that balance. He did not just base his ideas unilaterally or via a single lens like earlier philosopher. He tried to achieve that balance. So he believed that state was not a necessary evil, but he considered the state to be highest form of ethical life. And he believed that the state can make human realize their potential in the best way. Now his core concepts. So first such concept is dialectical method, which is a way to understand how ideas, institutions and history evolve. और यहाँ पे in the case of Hegel, this evolution that he traced, even first instance में he talked about history as a rational process evolving towards greater freedom. और यहाँ भी all of his ideas they usually trace a broader theme, meta theme you can say, the meta theme in which all the institutions that corner people, that surround people, are evolving towards a higher stage. He tried to look for pattern. He was keen on looking certain pattern, and that pattern that he was optimistically found was at least a positive sign, at least a positive state, which will gradually find itself when the history keep evolving itself. In other words, he saw something in the future. The pattern he wove, the pattern he drawn, उन पैटर्न में ही फाउंड दैट कि जितने भी स्टेजेस हैं जो शुरू फ्रॉम द टाइम्स ऑफ प्री हिस्टोरिक टाइम से लेकर मॉडर्न टाइम से जितने भी स्टेजेस आ रहे हैं दे आर टेकिंग पीपल टुवर्ड्स सर्टेन थिंग. एंड यहाँ पे he saw that most of the pattern, even if the journey it was quite painful, the journey it was not without friction, but ultimately they are evolving towards something better. That was his compromise. That was his the matter theme. And according to Hegel, this dialectical method involved three stages. Thesis, the first stage is of thesis, which is an idea that is already existing, a pre-existing idea or condition. Then the second stage is of antithesis, which is the opposite or contradictory idea. Then finally the synthesis, which is a compromise, a resolution that unite the two in higher form. And even in anthropology, most of the approaches towards religion, most of the approaches towards the creation of society, they also traverse the same thing. The society, it went through these three stages. The stage that started with thesis, then the contradictory stages, antithesis and synthesis. Like I give you example, like the marital institution है So according to anthropology, the marital institution, they evolved in this way. Like Louis Henry Morgan. Louis Henry Morgan, he talk about the evolution of marriage, which started with the first institution, the existing condition of group marriage, which later gave way to promiscuity, which is promiscuity means no no rules in marriage at all, and finally it culminated in monogamy, which we practice today. In the same way, religion के लेकर भी यही same thesis है. For example, E.B. Tyler and James Fraser, they provided these threefold stages for evolution of religion, which started with animism, which is the belief in all forms that have some life, like animals, plant, natural objects, every entity that possess some spirit. So animism se start hua, then it went to the contradictory stage, polytheism, which means belief in multiple deities, multiple things, and finally it culminated in monotheism. So यहाँ पे भी आप जो threefold stages हैं, which is given by the dialectical method of Hegel, you can see here in the institution of marriage, in institution of religion, and then even in society itself. यहाँ पे Henry Morgan, again, he provided for the threefold evolution of society, that it started with savagery, then it went through barbarism, and then finally culminated in civilization. So यहाँ पे the similar ideas were echoed down in other interdisciplinary fields as well. Now, I'm going to highlight this fact that Hegel stood for this in synthesis phase, that he always talked about a resolution, a compromise, a middle ground that unite the other forms. So this was the Hegel's explanation of how the world actually changed. So history, according to Hegel, is a dialectical process where the progress, it happens through the middle rungs of contradiction and finally culminate in a compromise, in a resolution. So यहाँ पे एक example दे रखा है, the feudalism, the first stage of political society. It started with feudalism, which was the thesis. Then it led to bourgeois revolution, the totally opposite instance that forms the antithesis, and finally it created model constitutional state, a synthesis version, a compromise version. Now the second of his concept is freedom through the ethical state. So for Hegel, true freedom, it is not doing whatever one wants, but it is living in accordance with reason, ethics, and the collective good. So here he echoes the same principle of Hobbes and Rousseau. Then he argued that modern constitutional state is the place where freedom becomes real. And here, by proposing such stature of modern constitutional state, he stood against the ideas of Hobbes, who saw the state as a tool to control chaos. And again, this idea is also contradictory to the ideas of Rousseau, who fear the power of institution. So, in against these ideas, Hegel celebrated the state as a moral and rational entity. So, in short, the earlier thinkers, especially Hobbes and Rousseau, both of them, they saw state in a different light. Whereas Hegel, he saw modern constitutional state as the one who provides freedom, one who is a moral and a rational entity. So, यहाँ पे, the state, according to Hegel, is not just a set of law, it is the embodiment of ethical life. It is, according to him, someone who is rational and someone who reciprocate the same atmosphere of a family. Now, his third concept, civil society versus the state. यहाँ पे Hegel carefully distinguishes between civil society and state. According to Hegel, civil society is the realm of private interest. It is a private sphere where यहाँ पे individual, they compete in the market, they pursue their job, they own property, form association, and it has an ultimate goal that is quite personal, which is riddled with conflict, inequality, and selfish growth. It's like children fighting among themselves. Whereas the state is a fatherly figure who, even if the children are fighting among themselves, he holds on to the composer and goes on working with providing the common thing, providing the basic amenities. So यहाँ पे the state, according to Hegel, it represents the universal interest, like a fatherly figure, and it unites diverse individual into a common ethical life. So ये जो example है, the fatherly figure, it may sound conservative, but it is an analogy. कि यहाँ पे how Hegel separated civil society and state. So then for Hegel, it is the state which can rise above the material interest, the material division, the conflicts, and harmonize the particular with the universal. Which in simple means, according to Hegel, the state is a overarching authority that try to balance the conflict interests, the conflicting interests, balance and it tries to resolve the dispute that exist in various entities of private life. Now, his fourth concept, the individual and the state, a moral relationship. Now, the ideas of the belief of Hegel about state may sound too conservative and may seem like he is providing support to the authority of state. He is asking for a supreme authority of state, but this is not the case. He may have full faith in the existence of a state, in the rationality of state, but he is not seeking any authoritarianism. He is not asking for giving full authority to states. यहाँ पे देख सकते हैं, he believed that individuals are not free in opposition to the state, but free through it. So here, यहाँ पे he provided support to the state कि if you have created a state and you keep opposing it, you keep rebelling against it, if you hold grudges against it, then the state and the people both cannot live in harmony. So at least if a state is provided certain free hand to work in the area for which it is created, like a state has been created so that it can preserve freedom, it can maintain law and order. So उसमें कम से कम we can at least believe that state is capable of doing that. So ऐसे में the individual freedom, it is not the prerogative of state, it is the duty of state. So first we must believe that state is capable of doing it, and then we must also believe that the state has the wherewithal along with the moral embodiment, moral impediment to act in this way. Impediment. So यहाँ पे मतलब ये है कि state जो है उसका काम है to protect the individual freedom. So यहाँ पे हमें trust करना होगा कि yes, state is an ethical and moral person, and the state is inclined on preserving individual freedom. The goal of state is not to dominate. यहाँ पे आपको समझ में आ रहा है कि Hegel believed that the state does not have the goal, it does not have domination or dictatorship or authoritarianism in its mind. It is there to actualize freedom in a rational and moral way, and we should provide the leeway to it. Then he also praised the constitutional monarchy and the rule of law, but he defended the bureaucracy, which यहाँ पे भी एक idea जो है ये it looks quite contradictory, because sometimes bureaucracy is seen as the oppressive arm of the state. It's seen as a chain of state because bureaucracy is a machinery that can implement important activities, implement important plans. But bureaucracy is also the entity, also the machinery which can imprison people, which can threaten individual freedom. So यहाँ पे his defense against bureaucracy was not the bureaucracy that cruel-minded. He talked about a rational and impartial system that manages public affairs. So his defense was in support of a bureaucracy that stands as a steel frame, that is rational, that is unbiased, that is objective, and delivers cutting edge services to people and manages its affair in an impartial way. And then his next thought that he feared the mob rule and unrestrained capitalism. So according to him, both the extreme, when mobs have been given free hand and the capitalism it go it walks unrestrained, both of these they are clear threat to individual freedom. Now Hegel's influence and legacy. So first, his influence on Karl Marx. So Marx adopted the dialectical method, but he replaced his idealism with materialism. So the dialectical method of Karl Marx was of historical materialism. So according to this method, it is not the idea that move history, but the economic forces and class conflict. So you can see the difference between the idealism dialectical method or ideal dialectical method of Hegel versus historical materialism of Karl Marx. So the difference is कि Karl Marx ने कहा है कि Hegel was right that ideas they move in certain direction. Ideas evolve, institutions evolve, people, society, everything evolve, and but the prime mover here is not the ideas, but material forces, economic and class conflict that form the core of the philosophy of Karl Marx. Then the second difference, Hegel saw the state as the embodiment of freedom, the provider of freedom, the ethical and rational entity, whereas Marx saw the state as the instrument of class domination. And yet, Marx always acknowledged his debt to Hegel's deep understanding of history and contradiction, because you arrive at certain pattern only when you study a lot, when uh, you dive deeply into the currents of history, and that's when you can arrive at certain clear-sighted patterns. Now the impacts on liberalism, nationalism, and critical theory. So the influence was in such a way that liberals adopted Hegel's support for constitutionalism and the rule of law. Then the nationalists, especially in Germany and Italy, they use his idea of the ethical state to support national unification. Then critical theorists like Marcuse and Habermas, they use Hegel's idea to explore how freedom and reason can be reclaimed in modern society. All in all, Hegel's idea on state, on rationality, on freedom, on finding common ground, all of them, they have certain followers. Now, the contemporary relevance, why Hegel still matters. So, his vision of state, when he saw state as the moral embodiment, it is relevant in today's debate when we talk about welfare state versus free market capitalism. And this thing became quite glaringly visible, especially in the COVID-19 instance. It's a free market capitalism, the laissez-faire capitalism. It collapsed. Even the pandemic just made its first footfall. So यहाँ पे only the welfare state stood up to the last. Only the welfare state that look after the population. So यहाँ पे first the idea Hegel का कि unrestrained capitalism तो out of question है, वो तो होना ही नहीं चाहिए. But free market capitalism without welfare state, it also a recipe for disaster. वो COVID-19 जो है उसमें clearly सबको visible हो गया कि the free market capitalism can work only in normal circumstances. But when we are facing the tough times, when we are facing challenging situations, conflicts, then it is the welfare state that can provide the harmony. And है जितने भी मेजर कंट्रीज है, मेजर डेमोक्रेसीज हैं, यहाँ पे स्टेट है that provided the vaccination, state that provided required relief. Then his ideas are also relevant when we talk about public interest versus private greed. So which is again similar chamber of welfare state versus free market capitalism debate. So in this chamber, we have slightly moved from the state to the local entities, to the private sphere. So यहाँ पे the private greed, let's take an example of the economic exploitation, the exploitation of mineral wealth. ये एक example है. तो ट्राइबल में यहाँ पे दो चीजें. First, public interest में we need the forest, but then the private interest, the economic interest, they call for the exploitation of the material, the raw material that we have. So ऐसे में we need to find the balance. Look, that is first thing, क्योंकि Hegel stood for balance. लेकिन if we give primacy to any either of them, अगर public interest की बात करें, then raw material उसको use नहीं कर पाएंगे. But if we give full hand, free hand to private greed, तो फिर public interest जितने भी हैं, जो tribal हैं, they will be, thrown out of their forest. फिर जो economic disaster है, उसके साथ जो ecological disaster होगा, who will pay for that? Then third debate is about citizenship, community, and national identity. Because citizen, when they come together, they have a role of community, and here it is the state that can, coexist. They can rise above them and provide an overarching authority, a universal framework. Now, the next thing, law, rights, and ethical institution. So it is Hegel's idea that rights must be connected to duties and institution. It is gaining attention in legal and political theory. So, वो जरूरी है because in today's time, first, our population, it has burgeoned, and with it, our interests, they have also gone up, our conflicts have gone up, then our increasing interests, they are coming directly in cross with others' freedom. Same example आप ले सकते हैं कि जैसे अभी मॉनसून सीजन चल रहा है, तो यहाँ पे जितनी भी मेगा सिटीज हैं, वो उनमें जो इरेटिक रेनफॉल है, अनप्रिडिक्टेबल इरेटिक रेनफॉल है, उसके इंस्टेंसेस आर इंक्रीजिंग इन रिसेंटली. एंड वो क्यों है? क्योंकि हर कोई जो है वो एयर कंडीशनर यूज कर रहा है. फिर फॉसिल फ्यूल एमिशंस है, वो काफी ज्यादा बढ़ गए हैं. देन जो पॉपुलेशन प्रेशर है बिल्डिंग्स पे, उन सब पे, वो बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ गया है. लास्ट ईयर हमने देखा था कि कैसे मेजर सिटीज दे वर फ्लडेड. सो यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हैं कि लाइक द चॉइस टू हैव द एयर कंडीशनर all the time, or choice to enjoy the cool and pleasant winds of pleasant air of AC, it is a personal choice and you have the right to it, but you also have the duty. क्योंकि अगर आप सिर्फ अपनी एसी के बारे में सोचेंगे तो हर कोई एसी लगाएगा, तो फिर वो जो इंस्टेंस जो होता है HIV का, या फिर इसको कह सकते हैं UHI का, अर्बन हीट आइलैंड, जो मेजर सिटीज में देखा जा रहा है. क्योंकि हर कोई अगर एसी लगा रहा है, हर कोई अपना अगर व्हीकल रख रहा है, तो उसकी वजह से जो सिटीज जो है, मेगा सिटीज जो है, दे आर टर्निंग इनटू अ हॉटस्पॉट फॉर क्लाउड बर्स्ट. और क्लाउड बर्स्ट की वजह से जो इरेटिक रेनफॉल है, अनप्रेडिक्टेबल रेनफॉल है, फ्लडिंग है, वो भी एक कंसर्न हो गया है. फिर व्हेन we are talking about rights, then we must fulfill the duties. ये एक एग्जाम्पल दिया एक ब्रॉडर लेवल पे. छोटे लेवल पे तो बहुत सारे एग्जाम्पल्स हैं जो आप लोग अपने आसपास भी जानते हैं कि अब जो मॉडर्न जो स्टेट्स जो है, they started getting this recognition that if we want to give rights to people, then those rights must not be free of cost. We must laden those rights with duties. And I don't know, आने वाले टाइम में ये ड्यूटी जो है, ड्यूटीज, ये भी जस्टिफिएबल हो जाएगी. यानी अगर आपने ड्यूटीज नहीं की तो फिर आपको फिर कोर्ट के अंदर भी पेश होना पड़ सकता है. फिर ये तो हो गया फर्स्ट साइड. देन द राइट्स एंड ड्यूटीज, दे मस्ट बी कनेक्टेड विद द इंस्टीट्यूशन, क्योंकि द इंस्टीट्यूशन, अगेन इन द वर्ड्स ऑफ हीगल, इज द ओवरआर्चिंग अथॉरिटी दैट प्रोवाइड द यूनिवर्सल शॉक एब्जॉर्प्शन. यानी जो एम्पायर का रोल है, जो मीडिएटर है, द ओवरआर्चिंग फादर इज द स्टेट, द इंस्टीट्यूशन, वेरियस इंस्टीट्यूशन, एंड वो इंस्टीट्यूशन भी उनको भी दे मस्ट नो woven in this framework in a such a way that people be given rights, then their rights must be balanced with the duties. और ये जो पैरामीटर है, it is gaining attention in today's the legal political dictionary. फिर बात करते हैं his ideas as ideas of history as a progress. So here, just like Henry Louis Morgan and E.B. Tyler, various anthropologists, various sociologists, various eminent philosophers from humanities, all of them, they talk about such threefold stages: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. In the same way, Hegel, he also talk about the evolution of history towards freedom, the highest stage. And uh, this belief, this is quite hopeful. This idea is quite hopeful, but also controversial. The thinkers like Francis Fukuyama, who famously declared that the Cold War is the end of history, and the liberal democracy may be the final stage of political development. So, even if Hegel did not say it openly or directly, Hegel ने कहा था कि liberal democracy is the final stage. But some believe that liberal democracy may be the ultimate stage, because right now we may be looking at the post-synthesis stage. ऐसा कुछ लोग मानते हैं कि the synthesis has been achieved, the compromise has been achieved. That compromise was the liberal democracy. And right now we are in the post-synthesis stage कि अब we are either जो cycle है, it is going to repeat itself, or we are going to see something worse. But the critics, they argue that real freedom is still far from achieved. Because if liberal democracy is the ultimate stage, then many people would have gotten their much needed freedom. But बहुत सारे लोग हैं, marginalized groups हैं, non-Western societies हैं, the countries from global south, they're still yearning for freedom. So ऐसे में the liberal democracy cannot be called the final stage. फिर बात करते हैं the criticism of Hegel, where the first criticism leveled on him is that his language and writing are notoriously difficult, and sometimes it leads to misinterpretations. क्योंकि the same writing, while providing optimism to some, it may yield a streak of pessimism, or you can say criticism for someone. Second criticism leveled on him, that his ideas or his idealism is detached from real world problem. Then some people who consider that his belief on state, his support for the state, represent the conservative and authoritarian trends, because when he said that state is the ultimate rational authority, it looks like he was providing covert support to the authority of state. And अगर state को सारी authority मिल जाएगी, then he was ultimately a supporter of authoritarian dictatorships, tyrannies. Fair next criticism, feminists and post-colonial thinker, they have criticized Hegel for neglecting gender, race, and empire in his grand narrative. क्योंकि the ideas of Hegel were general and mostly talk about state and individuals. Now, PYQ insights. So, the many questions are about Hegel's dialectical method, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and how it transformed his view as a view of history as progressive and rational. Then many repeated questions ask how Hegel conceptualized freedom not in isolation but within the ethical framework of state, how he believed that state is the overarching authority that can provide the required freedom which people in isolation cannot achieve. Then his view about civil society versus state, Many PYQs have been asked to distinguish between his idea on civil society, the private realm of private interest, versus the state, where his ideas are often compared and contrasted with that of Marx's historical materialism. Then his views on laws and constitutionalism were also asked. And finally, a summary and conclusion. So, at the core of Hegel's political philosophy is the idea that freedom is not merely individual autonomy. It is not doing what one wants, but to exist, to participate in rational institutions such as family, civil society, and state. Then he gave the dialectical method, which understand that historical progress is not a linear process, but a dynamic unfolding of contradictions. Then he believed that modern constitutional state is the highest expression of human freedom. And finally, I keep popping up this support message. It is because I need support, but it is totally voluntary and any amount will be appreciated. This is the UPI. And above that, if you need any further explanation, you can ask me in the comments. This is it. Thank you very much.